Get out of here right now. We don't serve your kind. Derek Langley's voice thundered across the marble floor of Ocean Trust Bank, sharp and cruel, every word landing like a blow. Those words weren't whispered under his breath. They were shouted loud enough for every customer in the lobby to turn and stare. A black woman in her early 40s stood frozen, documents still in her hand, her composure intact though her heart raced. That moment was more than shocking. It was humiliating, and it revealed the ugly truth she had come to investigate. Before I take you deeper into this story, comment your city or country so I know how far this story is reaching. Subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the rest of this incredible journey. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Because what happened inside that Miami branch was not a random insult. It was the beginning of a story that would shake an entire banking system. Lillian Harper had walked into the building not as the powerful CEO of Harper Financial Group, but as an ordinary customer, using her grandmother's maiden name, Lillian Brooks. She wore a simple sweater, plain trousers, no jewelry, nothing that would mark her as wealthy or powerful. She came with a purpose, to see how Ocean Trust Bank, the institution her company had quietly acquired for $1.8 billion, treated black customers who walked in without status, without a name the world recognized. For 4 days, she planned to come back, quietly observe, take note, and see if the legacy of discrimination her grandmother had endured 25 years earlier was still alive behind these polished glass doors. On that first morning, as neon lights from the busy Miami street reflected through the windows, she walked to the front desk carrying her identification and financial papers neatly organized in a folder. Derek Langley, the customer service manager, spotted her right away. His smile was thin, his eyes dismissive, the kind of look that judged a person before they said a word. He glanced at her paperwork, but barely skimmed it, with a tone dripping with condescension. He suggested she should try the website instead of bothering staff with simple requests. Lillian did not flinch. She asked calmly to speak with a banker about opening an account and exploring investment options. Derek leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening while still visible to the waiting customers. "Ma'am, you'd save yourself a lot of time if you just used the ATM or logged in online. People like you usually don't qualify for the services you're asking about." Lillian kept her voice steady. She had been through tougher rooms, tougher battles, boardrooms where billion-dollar deals were decided. But this moment was personal, because what Derek didn't know was that she carried not just her own dignity, but the weight of her grandmother Clara's story. Clara Brooks, the woman who raised her, had once walked into a bank just like this in the year 2000 and was told her small business dream didn't deserve a loan. That denial had stripped Clara of a chance to build generational wealth for her family. And Lillian never forgot the pain in her grandmother's voice when she told her that story. It was Clara's memory that pushed her to study late nights, to earn her Harvard MBA, to work her way from analyst to CEO, and eventually to purchase the very kind of bank that had once shut the door on her grandmother. As she stood there in the lobby, she noticed something that made her blood stir. A white businessman, Mr. Alvarez, walked in wearing a tailored suit and carrying no paperwork at all. Derek's entire demeanor shifted instantly. The cold eyes turned warm. The dismissive tone became cheerful. Within minutes, Alvarez was guided to a consultation desk, greeted with coffee and a smile, while Lillian was left standing in the corner, told to wait, told to consider easier options. The contrast was glaring, and every second of it confirmed why she had chosen to come undercover. She wrote down everything as soon as she left that day, every detail of Derek's tone, every action that revealed bias, every look exchanged between him and the branch manager Victor Reyes, who had watched silently from his glass office upstairs. Something in Victor's eyes told her this was not just personal prejudice, but part of a larger pattern. Maybe even something deliberately structured. Lillian suspected Derek wasn't just rude. He was protecting something, hiding something, and she intended to find out what. That evening, back home in her Miami apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay, her 17-year-old daughter Elena confronted her. Elena had always known her mother was powerful, respected, the kind of woman who appeared on magazine covers and Forbes lists. But she couldn't understand why her mother would risk humiliation by pretending to be ordinary. "Mom, why are you doing this? You already own the bank. You can fire them if you want. Why put yourself through this?" Lillian sat across from her daughter, her tone calm but firm. "Because if I walk in as the CEO, they will put on a mask, treat me like royalty, and nothing will change. But if I walk in as the woman your grandmother once was, I will see the truth. And until we face the truth, we cannot fix what's broken." Elena sighed, not convinced, but she saw the fire in her mother's eyes and knew the decision was final. That first day ended without an explosion, but the stage was set. Derek thought he had brushed off another unqualified customer. Victor thought his policies were safe. Customers in the lobby thought they had just witnessed another quiet dismissal. Nothing worth remembering. But what no one realized was that the woman they had just humiliated held the keys to the entire bank, the authority to decide who stayed and who would be gone by the end of the week. Lillian knew this was only the beginning. She closed her notebook, whispered a promise to her grandmother's memory, and prepared to return the next day. Because what Derek and Victor had started with their prejudice was about to ignite into a firestorm that would burn through the walls of Ocean Trust and expose everything they wanted to hide. That is how the story began. Not with a polite conversation or a hidden deal in a boardroom, but with an insult shouted across a lobby. Words meant to degrade, but instead words that would spark justice. And as Lillian Harper went to sleep that night, still dressed as Lillian Brooks, she knew the next 3 days would push her patience, her pride, and her purpose to the limit. What Derek thought was just another customer he could dismiss would soon become the moment that ended his career. And what looked like humiliation to bystanders would soon become the foundation of a reform that would change the future of an entire institution. The next morning, Lillian Harper returned to Ocean Trust Bank, still disguised as Lillian Brooks, her plain sweater freshly pressed, her folder packed even thicker than before. She had spent the night organizing every document she could possibly need: driver's license, proof of address, utility bills, credit reports, business registration papers, even tax returns. Anything that would silence the excuses Derek Langley had used against her the day before. She walked in calmly, determined to give him no room to say she was unprepared. Yet the moment Derek saw her, his face tightened into the same mask of irritation, as though her presence alone was an inconvenience. She stepped up to his desk and spoke clearly. "I've brought every document you requested. I'd like to meet with a financial advisor about investments." Derek didn't even glance at her papers before sighing dramatically, his voice cutting through the lobby. "This isn't enough. Ma'am, we'll need to see at least 2 years of complete contracts from your business and audited tax returns. Without those, there's no reason to waste a banker's time." His words stung not because of their content, but because she knew what they meant. An endless moving of the goalpost, a strategy designed to keep certain customers out. Lillian's jaw tightened, but she held her composure, simply nodding and sliding her paperwork across the counter so that he would have to touch it. Have to see that she wasn't going anywhere. Behind her, a Latin couple entered the branch. They were dressed casually, the husband in jeans and a polo, the wife with her toddler on her hip. They asked about opening a joint savings account. Derek's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. His voice warmed. His smile returned. "Of course. Let me help you with that right away," he said. gesturing them toward a consultation desk without requesting a single paper. Lillian noticed. And so did Marissa Coleman, a young teller who had been quietly watching the exchange. Marissa's eyes flickered with sympathy as she glanced at Lillian, but she quickly looked down at her station, fear written across her face. She was a single mother with 2 young children, barely making enough to cover rent in Miami. She knew better than to cross Derek or Victor Reyes, the branch manager. Still, the look she gave Lillian lingered, a silent acknowledgement that she saw what was happening, that she understood the unfairness, even if she couldn't yet speak against it. Victor Reyes stood near the glass wall of his office, arms folded, watching the entire scene. He didn't intervene, didn't offer guidance, only raised his eyebrows as though satisfied with how Derek was handling things. From where she stood, Lillian could see him give a subtle nod, a signal of approval that told her this wasn't just Derek's prejudice, but policy from the top. That realization hardened her resolve. She was no longer simply testing for bias. She was uncovering a coordinated effort to protect power by excluding certain communities. When Lillian returned home that evening, the tension with her daughter Elena boiled over. Elena slammed her backpack on the kitchen table, frustration etched into her voice. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You own the bank. You don't need to stand there and let them treat you like that. Just fire them already." Lillian set down her folder gently, her voice calm but firm. "Elena, do you remember the story I told you about Grandma Clara? How she walked into a bank 25 years ago, dressed in her best clothes, carrying her dream in a folder just like this? And how they sent her away with nothing but shame? That pain didn't just leave her. It passed to me, and it shaped everything I've done. If I reveal who I am too soon, they'll cover it up. They'll deny what's really happening. But if I stand there as Clara once did, I can show the world that nothing has changed. And then I can change it." Elena crossed her arms, tears of anger pooling in her eyes. "But you shouldn't have to let them disrespect you to prove a point." Lillian reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. Sometimes dignity is not about avoiding pain. It's about standing in the middle of it, refusing to bow, and using that moment to light a fire for others. "I need you to trust me." The next morning, Lillian replayed Derek's words in her mind. "We'll need more documents. No reason to waste a banker's time." She knew his pattern. Demand more than necessary. Create obstacles until customers gave up, while offering a red carpet to those who looked like they belonged. She also knew this wasn't new. It was the same strategy banks had used for decades to deny loans to minority communities while channeling resources to others. Redlining had simply evolved into modern paperwork barriers. Marissa, meanwhile, wrestled with her conscience. She had seen Derek humiliate customers before, but something about this woman struck her differently. Maybe it was the calm resilience in Lillian's eyes, the refusal to shrink, the quiet dignity she carried. Marissa thought of her own struggles as a single mother, how she had been denied a car loan once despite having steady income. She wanted to say something, to speak up, but fear of losing her job chained her to silence. As she processed deposits and handed receipts to other customers, she glanced at Lillian again, whispering a silent prayer that somehow this woman would not be broken. Victor, however, had other plans. Later that day, he called Derek into his office, through the glass. Marissa could see them talking, Victor leaning in, his expression sharp. Derek emerged with a smirk, walking past Lillian with exaggerated confidence. The message was clear. He had backing from above. Lillian wrote it all down in her notebook. Every glance, every word, every transaction she saw that revealed a pattern. When she finally left the bank that evening, she felt both exhausted and sharpened. She knew tomorrow would bring more resistance, more excuses, maybe even open hostility, but she also knew she wasn't standing there just for herself. She was standing for Clara, for every person denied dignity at a bank counter, for every mother like Marissa too afraid to speak. She was standing for Elena, to show her daughter that power wasn't about wearing a crown in public, but about carrying truth in silence until the right moment to reveal it. As the sun set over Miami, Lillian closed her notes and looked out at the city skyline. She whispered to herself, "Patience. Brooks. They think they're wearing you down. They don't know you're building a case." And with that, she prepared for day 3, ready to face Derek again, ready to step closer to the storm she knew was coming. By the 3rd day, Lillian Harper knew exactly what she was walking into. Yet she carried herself with the same calm grace, dressed simply, still answering to the name Lillian Brooks. She had added one more set of documents to her folder: business loan proposals, market research, repayment schedules, all carefully laid out to look like the plans of a hard-working small business owner. She was determined to give Derek Langley no excuse, no loophole to dismiss her. As soon as she entered the bank, Derek spotted her, and the annoyance on his face was impossible to hide. He leaned over his counter with a sneer and said loudly enough for nearby customers to hear, "Back again? I thought I made it clear yesterday. This bank requires serious paperwork, not pipe dreams." His tone wasn't just unprofessional. It was meant to humiliate, to strip her of dignity in front of strangers. Lillian didn't flinch. She met his eyes and said evenly, "I've brought everything you asked for. I'm requesting information about a business loan." Derek scowled but took the folder, flipping through the documents with exaggerated slowness, sighing as if the weight of the papers alone was an inconvenience. Then he snapped it shut and pushed it back toward her, saying, "You know, you'd probably be more comfortable at a community bank down the street. They specialize in smaller clients like you. This institution deals with priority customers, the kind who actually have the means to follow through." Lillian felt the heat of his words but kept her tone steady. "I meet your requirements, and I'm entitled to the same service as anyone else. I'd like to speak with a financial advisor." Derek's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. He wasn't just being rude. He was hiding something. She had seen the way Victor Reyes, the branch manager, had been watching from his office the last 2 days, giving silent approval to Derek's behavior. Now she noticed Victor again, standing behind his glass wall, speaking quietly into his phone, his gaze fixed on her. Something about the way they moved in tandem told her this was more than prejudice. It was a system, maybe even a conspiracy. She had heard rumors of banks funneling resources toward certain clients while burying others in red tape, and she was starting to believe Ocean Trust was running exactly that kind of operation. At the teller line, Marissa Coleman noticed too. She watched Derek's interaction, her stomach tightening. She had worked there long enough to know the difference between a legitimate request for documentation and a deliberate attempt to block someone. What Derek was doing wasn't policy. It was targeted. And the fact that Victor never corrected him made it worse. As Lillian turned away, clutching her folder with quiet dignity, Marissa made a choice. She slipped a folded sheet of paper across the counter while handing Lillian a deposit receipt from another customer. Lillian glanced down just long enough to see the heading, Internal Service Guidelines. Her heart skipped. She knew what Marissa had done. It was dangerous, but it was a lifeline. Later, when she opened it in private, she would see proof that the requirements Derek was demanding of her had never been applied to other customers. It was the evidence she needed, and Marissa had risked her job to give it. Meanwhile, across the lobby, a Latin customer named Jorge had been waiting for his appointment. He had watched the way Derek treated Lillian with disbelief. He whispered to his wife, "Did you see that?" He didn't even look at her documents. Outraged, he pulled out his phone and began recording, posting the video to TikTok with the caption, "Day 3. Same black woman, same disrespect. Ocean Trust is a shame." Within hours, the clip gathered thousands of views, comments flooding in from people who recognized the pattern all too well. Some wrote about their own experiences with banks, others tagged journalists, and a few even dug up Lillian Brooks's name from the paperwork visible in the video. What Jorge didn't know was that he had just poured fuel on a fire about to blaze nationwide. Back inside the branch, Lillian decided to confront Derek more directly. "Why are you asking me for documents you don't ask from others? Why was the couple yesterday sent straight to a consultation without a single form of proof?" Derek's face reddened, caught off guard by her sharp question. He looked around nervously, then muttered, "Different circumstances. They fit the profile." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Fit the profile. That was the heart of it. The unspoken policy Victor had been enforcing. The shadow system that treated some clients as worthy and others as disposable. Customers nearby heard the phrase, some whispering, some shaking their heads. Victor, watching from above, noticed the shift. He stormed out of his office, his polished shoes clicking against the tile, his voice low but sharp as he approached Derek. "Handle this, and don't make a scene," he ordered. Derek nodded, but his hands were trembling. He was losing control of the narrative, and he knew it. For years, he and Victor had diverted loans and investment opportunities to what they called priority clients. Wealthy, mostly white business owners who rewarded them with kickbacks and connections. Anyone who didn't fit the mold was stalled, humiliated, or quietly denied until they gave up. But now, this woman in a plain sweater was refusing to leave, refusing to be broken. She was threatening not just Derek's authority, but the entire operation he and Victor had been protecting. Marissa, heart pounding, realized she had crossed a line by slipping Lillian the document. If Victor discovered what she had done, she could lose everything. But when she saw the quiet gratitude in Lillian's eyes as she tucked the paper into her folder, she felt a flicker of courage. For years, she had watched injustice in silence. Maybe this time she had chosen the right side. Lillian left the branch that day with more than she had expected. She hadn't just gathered evidence of bias. She had uncovered the outline of a conspiracy. Derek's hostility wasn't random, and Victor's silence wasn't ignorance. Together, they were gatekeepers of a system that thrived on exclusion. She knew tomorrow would be harder, maybe even dangerous, but she also knew she was close to forcing their hand. The more they pushed, the closer they came to exposing themselves. That night, as she sat at her dining table with Elena nearby, she unfolded the document Marissa had given her. Line after line proved her suspicions. Guidelines that explicitly stated what was required for account openings and loans, none of which matched Derek's ever-growing demands. She showed it to Elena, who shook her head in disbelief. "So they've been lying this whole time?" Lillian nodded slowly. "Yes. And now we can prove it." Elena still worried, her voice trembling. "What if they go further? Mom, what if they do something worse?" Lillian closed the folder, her eyes steady. "Then we'll face it, because the truth is already out there. And once the truth begins to spread, there's no stopping it." Day 3 had ended not with victory, but with a dangerous escalation. Derek was angrier, Victor was more alert, and Marissa was now silently allied with Lillian. The videos online were gaining traction, and whispers of misconduct were beginning to form. The storm was coming, and Lillian knew it. But she was ready. She had faced billionaires in boardrooms, politicians in negotiations, and critics in the press. She could face Derek and Victor, too. What they didn't know was that the woman they tried to push out of line was already standing in the center of a stage they could no longer control. And tomorrow, when Derek's anger boiled over, the world would finally see the truth. By the fourth morning, the tension inside Ocean Trust Bank was a storm waiting to break, and Lillian Harper knew it the moment she walked in as Lillian Brooks. Her plain outfit neat, her folder once again filled to silence any excuse. Derek Langley spotted her from across the lobby, his face darkening, his patience long gone. He slammed a drawer shut, strode toward her desk, and before she could even greet him, his voice erupted across the polished floor, sharp and venomous. "Why are you still here? Didn't I tell you this bank doesn't waste time on people like you?" The words echoed through the lobby, silencing customers mid-transaction, heads turning in disbelief. Lillian stood steady, her voice calm though her pulse pounded. "I am a customer. I have fulfilled every requirement you demanded, and I am entitled to service." Derek's lip curled into a sneer, his voice dripping with fury. "You're a troublemaker, a liar, and you're here to cause a scene." When she refused to step back, when she refused to bow her head as so many before her had been forced to. Derek's hand shot out, and with shocking speed, he slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the lobby like a gunshot. Gasps filled the room. A child cried, a woman dropped her pen, and Lillian stood frozen, her cheek burning, her eyes locked on Derek's face. He stepped back, chest heaving, realizing what he had done but too consumed by arrogance to stop. He shouted, "Security! Call the police! This woman is disturbing the peace!" Two guards hurried over, not to restrain Derek but to surround Lillian, their hands hovering near her arms as if ready to drag her out. Phones rose instantly, customers filming the unfolding chaos, whispers racing through the crowd. Lillian didn't shout. She didn't strike back. She simply said in a clear voice, "You assaulted me, and there are cameras in this lobby. I suggest you think carefully about what you do next." Derek's face flushed red, his authority trembling. "You threatened me. Everyone here saw it." He barked, though the lie was obvious. The guards hesitated, unsure, their eyes darting to the phones recording every second. Within minutes, Officer Martinez and two other uniformed police officers rushed through the glass doors, lights flashing outside as their patrol car pulled up. Derek met them halfway, pointing at Lillian with exaggerated gestures. "That's her. Arrest her now. She attacked me. She's causing a disturbance." Martinez looked at Lillian, standing calmly with her folder clutched to her chest, her cheek still marked from the slap. He turned back to Derek, his brow furrowed. "Sir, are you saying this woman attacked you?" Derek nodded furiously. "Yes, she's dangerous. She needs to be removed immediately." Martinez gestured toward Lillian, his hand hovering near his cuffs. "Ma'am, please step aside." The crowd murmured louder, some protesting, some urging caution. And then, from behind the teller line, Marissa Coleman's voice rang out, trembling but resolute. "That's not true. I saw what happened." He slapped her. The entire lobby froze, all eyes on Marissa. Her hands shook as she gripped the counter. But she didn't back down. This woman did nothing wrong. She only asked for service. And he assaulted her. Derek spun toward her, his face contorting in rage. "Stay out of this, Marissa, or you'll regret it." But it was too late. Other customers began to speak up. Jorge, the Latin man who had filmed the previous day, stepped forward, holding his phone high. "I recorded everything." He hit her. "Look." He pressed play, and the sound of the slap filled the lobby again. Undeniable. More customers added their voices, murmuring agreement, shaking their heads at Derek. The officers hesitated, their posture shifting, uncertainty creeping into their faces as they realized the narrative wasn't so simple. Lillian spoke then, her voice calm, deliberate, every word measured. "Officer, I am not resisting. I am asking you to review the security footage of this bank. I am asking you to listen to the witnesses around you. If you arrest me, you are ignoring evidence that is right in front of you." Her dignity in that moment was undeniable, her poise sharper than any raised voice could have been. Martinez glanced at the phones raised around him, the crowd now fully engaged, and finally lowered his hand from his cuffs. "We'll need to verify what happened," he said carefully, already sensing the weight of the situation. Meanwhile, outside the bank, Jorge's video had gone live on X, spreading at lightning speed. Within hours, it hit 500,000 views. Hashtags calling out Ocean Trust and Derek Langley by name. Comments poured in, outrage, disbelief, personal stories of discrimination, demands for accountability. Reporters began circling, and customers outside the bank whispered about the woman inside who had been slapped but stood her ground. Inside. Derek's fury only grew. He lunged toward Lillian again, but Victor Reyes finally stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his shoulder, his voice low and panicked. "Enough. Derek, enough." Victor wasn't protecting Lillian. He was protecting himself, already sensing the scandal spiraling beyond control. Lillian, her cheek still stinging, raised her chin. She wasn't there to scream or to crumble. She was there to expose. She turned to Marissa, nodding in gratitude, then faced the officers again. "This is bigger than one slap," she said softly but firmly. "This is about how people are treated when they walk into this bank." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were no longer just handling a disturbance call. They were standing in the middle of a storm about to go national. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Derek, once confident in his authority, now looked small, frantic, his lies crumbling under the weight of witnesses and cameras. Marissa, once silent, had stepped into the light, her courage undeniable. The customers, once passive, now stood as a chorus of truth, their voices amplifying what Derek wanted to bury. And Lillian, standing in the center of it all, held her dignity like a shield, refusing to be broken, even as the sting of humiliation burned across her skin. As the crowd buzzed, as phones continued streaming, as police hesitated on the edge of action, Lillian quietly reached into her purse and dialed her assistant Jasmine Tate. Her voice steady, she said only one sentence: "It's time. Bring the team." And with that, the tide of the story turned. The slap was no longer just an assault in a lobby. It was the moment the truth became undeniable, the spark that would burn through Ocean Trust and reveal everything hidden behind its polished glass walls. The bank lobby was still buzzing with shock from the slap when the glass doors opened again, and in walked Jasmine Tate, flanked by two sharply dressed associates carrying leather briefcases. Their presence shifted the atmosphere immediately. Customers whispering, security guards exchanging nervous glances, Derek stiffening as if sensing his control slipping away. Lillian Harper, still presenting herself as Lillian Brooks, stood calmly at the center of it all, her cheek faintly bruised but her composure unbroken. Jasmine moved quickly to her side, handing her a folder stamped with the Harper Financial Group seal, and then addressed the officers with crisp authority. "Before any further action is taken, you need to see these documents." Officer Martinez frowned but accepted them, flipping through page after page. Proof of ownership filings, board resolutions, acquisition contracts, each bearing Lillian's true name. Derek's smirk faltered as Martinez looked up and asked carefully, "Ma'am, are you Lillian Harper, the CEO of Harper Financial Group?" The room fell into stunned silence, customers craning their necks, employees frozen in disbelief. Lillian finally lifted her chin and spoke, her voice steady and resonant. "Yes. My company acquired Ocean Trust Bank for $1.8 billion earlier this year, and for the past 4 days. I've been treated as less than human by the very people I entrusted to serve this community." The words hit Derek like a thunderclap. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had fueled his actions evaporated, replaced by the pale terror of a man realizing he had struck not just a customer, but the owner of the institution. Victor Reyes rushed forward, his voice trembling as he tried to regain control. "Ms. Harper, Lillian, I had no idea. If we had known." But Lillian cut him off with a raised hand, her tone sharp but controlled. "That's exactly the problem. Victor, you treat people based on what you think you know, on what they look like, not on who they are or what they've earned. You didn't need to know my name to treat me with dignity. You chose not to." The customers in the lobby erupted in murmurs, some nodding, some clapping softly, others raising their phones higher to capture every second of the reversal. Derek found his voice again. Desperate now, his tone pleading. "Please, Ms. Harper, you don't understand. I've been through discrimination myself. I know what it's like to be overlooked. I didn't mean." Lillian's eyes narrowed, her words cutting through his excuses like steel. "You claim to know what discrimination feels like, yet you became the very face of it for others. That makes your actions worse, not better. You had the chance to show compassion, and instead, you chose cruelty." Derek tried to step closer, but the officers blocked him, sensing the volatility in his movements. He collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands, the weight of his downfall pressing down. Victor, realizing the tide had fully turned, tried to shift blame. "This was Derek's doing, not mine. I've always tried to maintain standards." But Lillian interrupted again, this time with Jasmine opening another folder and handing her a stack of printed emails. Lillian held them up, her voice clear enough for all to hear. "These are your words. Victor, direct instructions to your staff to prioritize profile clients while discouraging others. You orchestrated this, and you let Derek carry it out." Gasps filled the lobby, Marissa's eyes widening as she recognized the memos she had seen months ago, but had been too afraid to challenge. Victor's face drained of color, his body stiffening as though the ground had vanished beneath him. Lillian turned to the employees scattered around the branch, her voice now carrying both authority and compassion. "This ends today. This bank will not run on prejudice, on gatekeeping, or on exclusion. We are here to serve every community, not just the ones who look profitable on paper." Then she pointed directly at Derek and Victor. "Effective immediately. You are both terminated. Your access is revoked, and your actions will be reported to our compliance and legal departments." The officers stepped back, nodding slightly as if acknowledging the justice being served. Derek sputtered, "You can't fire me on the spot." But his voice cracked. "Unconvincing," Lillian replied simply. "I just did." The applause that followed wasn't loud at first, but it grew as customers began clapping, some cheering, others recording with tears in their eyes. A Latina woman whispered, "Finally," while a black father near the door hugged his son tightly, as if to say this moment mattered beyond banking. Marissa stepped forward cautiously, her voice wavering but firm. "Ms. Harper, I gave her the internal guidelines yesterday. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Lillian turned to her, a rare softness in her expression. That was brave. "Marissa, and it proved what I already suspected. You'll not be punished. You'll be part of what comes next." Relief washed over Marissa's face, tears brimming as she realized she had not only kept her job, but gained an ally in the woman leading the bank. Outside, the scene was spilling onto the streets. Reporters had arrived, microphones ready, cameras flashing as the crowd poured out of the lobby to tell what they had witnessed. On social media, the videos of Derek's slap had already reached millions, but now clips of Lillian's identity reveal were spreading with equal force. Headlines began forming within minutes. Undercover CEO exposes discrimination inside her own bank. Slap heard around Miami sparks corporate earthquake. Victor made one last attempt, his voice quivering. If you let this go public, it will destroy us. Lillian, it will destroy the bank. Lillian faced him squarely, her tone resolute. What destroys a bank is not the truth. It's the lies, the corruption, and the arrogance that rot it from the inside. Ocean Trust will not be destroyed by this. It will be reborn. The crowd erupted again, a mixture of applause and shouts of support. She gave final instructions to Jasmine. Preserve all security footage, gather every complaint filed in the past 3 years, and schedule a mandatory staff meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to rebuild from the ground up. Jasmine nodded firmly, already directing the associates to begin securing files, as the officers escorted Derek and Victor out of the building. Not in handcuffs, but in disgrace. Lillian felt the weight of her grandmother Clara's memory settle over her like a blessing. Clara had once been denied dignity in a bank just like this. Now, her granddaughter stood in that same space, not only reclaiming dignity for herself, but ensuring it for countless others. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "This is for you, Grandma." The customers who remained gathered around her, some offering thanks, some simply staring in awe at the woman who had endured humiliation only to reveal herself as the very person with the power to change everything. And though the slap still burned on her cheek, Lillian stood tall, unshaken, her eyes steady with purpose. The truth was out. The guilty were exposed, and the first step toward justice had been taken. But she knew the real work was just beginning, because exposing corruption was one thing, reforming a system was another. Tomorrow, she would face her staff, her board, and the nation tonight. She had shown the world who she really was. The morning after the public spectacle, Ocean Trust's Miami branch stood silent, its glass doors locked. A hastily printed sign taped to the entrance reading, "Closed today for internal meeting." Inside, employees shuffled nervously, whispering about the chaos of the day before. For many, the memory of Derek's slap and Lillian's shocking reveal still replayed in their minds. Cameras had caught every moment. News outlets had already turned the story into national headlines, and social media was ablaze with hashtags demanding justice. Lillian Harper, no longer wearing the disguise of Lillian Brooks, arrived that morning with Jasmine Tate at her side, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her posture commanding, her presence undeniable. Gone was the plain sweater and unassuming demeanor. Today she entered as herself, the CEO of Harper Financial Group, the woman who now held the future of Ocean Trust in her hands. Employees rose to their feet instinctively, silence falling over the room as she walked to the center of the lobby, now repurposed into an impromptu assembly hall. She looked at each face, saw fear in some, shame in others, and a glimmer of hope in a few. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but carried the authority of someone who had lived both sides of injustice. What happened yesterday will not be forgotten, and it will not be hidden. It will define how we move forward. This bank does not belong to Derek Langley or Victor Reyes. It belongs to the people we serve, and we will serve them with fairness, dignity, and respect. The staff shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed at having remained silent for so long. Others nodded subtly, relieved that the truth was finally being spoken aloud. Lillian continued, pacing slowly, her heels clicking against the polished tile. We will eliminate every practice that divides customers into categories of worthiness. There will be no more profile clients. Every customer will be treated by the same standard. Documentation requirements will be transparent, consistent, and fair, and every employee here will undergo mandatory anti-bias and equity training, not as a formality, but as a foundation of who we are. Her gaze fell on Marissa, who stood trembling near the teller line, unsure if her act of courage would cost her. Lillian extended her hand slightly toward her and said, "And for those who choose courage over silence, who choose truth over fear, this institution will honor you. Marissa Coleman, you are promoted to Community Engagement Advisor. You will help guide this bank into rebuilding trust with the neighborhoods we serve." A stunned murmur rippled through the staff, Marissa covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She had braced herself for punishment. Yet here she was being lifted into a role of leadership. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Thank you, Ms. Harper. I won't let you down." Lillian nodded. "I know you won't." Jasmine then distributed packets to the staff, outlining the new reforms in plain language, among them abolition of internal client categorization, establishment of an independent ethics review board, and creation of a customer ombudsman office accessible to the public. "These are not suggestions," Lillian declared firmly. "These are the standards by which we will be measured, and anyone unwilling to uphold them should leave now." The silence stretched, heavy, until finally one employee, a young loan officer who had followed Victor's discriminatory directives, quietly stood, muttered an apology, and walked out. Others glanced at each other but stayed, realizing the culture of impunity was over. By the afternoon, news vans had surrounded the building, reporters crowding the sidewalks, when Lillian finally emerged, escorted by Jasmine and Marissa, microphones thrust toward her. She stopped and faced the press with the same poise she had shown in the lobby the day before. "Ocean Trust is closed for business today," she announced, "but tomorrow, we reopen with a new promise, to treat every customer equally, to reject discrimination in every form, and to rebuild trust with the community we serve. This is not just about one slap or one insult. It is about dismantling a system that has harmed people for too long. We will not hide from accountability. We will lead by it." The reporters fired questions, asking about Derek, about Victor, about the possibility of lawsuits. Lillian answered calmly, "Those responsible have been terminated, and further investigations are underway. But our focus is not revenge. It is reform. The true measure of this bank will not be in how we punish the guilty, but in how we protect the innocent." Her words echoed across national broadcasts, praised by some, criticized by others, but impossible to ignore. Over the following weeks, the consequences unfolded quickly. Derek disappeared from the industry, his name now synonymous with arrogance and downfall. Victor faced a formal inquiry, his emails leaked to the press, his career in ruins. Meanwhile, Marissa found herself at the center of a new initiative, working with local churches, small businesses, and community leaders to design programs that welcomed customers who had long felt excluded. She sat on panels, spoke at town halls, and became the face of Ocean Trust's transformation. Customers who had once turned away now returned, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. By the 6-month mark, new account openings had surged by 42%, particularly among minority clients who finally felt seen and respected, but not everyone celebrated. Competitors began whispering that Lillian was exploiting the scandal for publicity, that her reforms were impractical, that focusing on equity would weaken profits. Some board members expressed unease, urging her to scale back, to move more slowly. Lillian listened, but did not waver. At a private board meeting, she told them, "Equity is not charity. It is strategy. A bank that excludes its community cannot thrive. A bank that embraces them will never fail." Her conviction silenced the skeptics, though some continued to grumble in shadows. At home, the story was more personal. Elena, once angry and fearful for her mother, now beamed with pride. She watched her mother stand before television cameras, congressional committees, and community gatherings, never once faltering, never once apologizing for demanding dignity. One evening, as they shared dinner in their apartment. Elena said softly, "I didn't understand before, but I do now. You weren't just proving a point. You were protecting people like Grandma, like me, like all of us." Lillian reached across the table, squeezed her daughter's hand, and whispered, "And one day, you'll carry it forward." The media storm gradually shifted. What began as a scandal became a case study, taught in business schools and debated in op-eds. Analysts noted the surge in customer trust, the way Ocean Trust had turned humiliation into opportunity, pain into progress. Lillian herself was invited to speak at financial forums, where she challenged peers to examine their own practices. The future of banking, she told a crowded conference hall, is not built on marble floors and glass towers. It is built on trust, and trust begins with equity. Through it all, Lillian remained grounded, never forgetting the sting of Derek's slap, the fear in Marissa's eyes, the humiliation in that lobby. She carried those moments not as wounds, but as reminders of why she fought. She knew the struggle wasn't over, that prejudice would not vanish overnight, that some would resist change. But she also knew the tide had turned, that Ocean Trust was no longer a symbol of exclusion, but a beacon of possibility. And for the first time in years, she felt Clara's presence not as a weight of grief, but as a whisper of pride, telling her she had done enough, at least for now. 8 months later, Ocean Trust no longer looked or felt like the same institution that had once humiliated customers in silence. The Miami branch, once known for whispers of exclusion, now buzzed with the energy of renewal. Customers of every background filled the lobby. Black, Latin, Asian, immigrant families, all greeted with the same warmth, offered the same opportunities, treated with the same respect. At a consultation desk near the front, an elderly black woman sat with a banker patiently explaining investment options. Her posture relaxed, her smile wide. Lillian Harper stood nearby, watching discreetly, her heart swelling at the sight. It was the kind of moment her grandmother Clara had been denied 25 years ago. And now, it was finally real. She closed her eyes for a brief second, whispering a thank you to Clara's memory, feeling that her grandmother's dream of dignity and finance had finally been honored. Across the lobby, a young Latin couple signed papers to open a business account, their toddler scribbling on scrap paper while staff brought them water and made them feel welcome. This was not charity. This was equity, alive in every corner of the bank. Marissa Coleman, once a fearful teller, now moved confidently through the branch, dressed in a crisp blazer, greeting customers by name, introducing them to new services. She had grown into her role as community engagement advisor with grace, building bridges between the bank and the neighborhoods it served. Under her leadership, Ocean Trust sponsored financial literacy workshops, small business seminars, and youth mentoring programs. She had become the very embodiment of change, proof that courage could transform not only a career, but an entire institution. Customers often thanked her directly, saying, "You're the reason I came back." And each time she smiled, humbled but proud, Lillian often reminded her, "Your voice saved me that day, and now it's saving countless others." As for Derek Langley, his name had become a cautionary tale, jobless, his reputation shattered. He gave a few bitter interviews claiming he had been scapegoated, but the videos told a story he could never escape. His downfall was permanent, and though Lillian felt no joy in his suffering, she saw it as the consequence of his choices. Victor Reyes faced legal action, his discriminatory emails presented in hearings, his career in finance effectively over. Their exits were not just punishment but warning. Discrimination was no longer tolerated behind closed doors. Financially, the bank had flourished. Within 6 months, New accounts surged by 42%, particularly among minority clients who had once avoided Ocean Trust. Competitors who mocked Lillian's reforms now scrambled to adopt similar policies. Realizing that equity was not a weakness but a strength, national media hailed Ocean Trust as a model. Case studies of its transformation appearing in universities and leadership programs. Lillian herself became a sought-after speaker. Her words broadcast on television. Her testimony requested at congressional hearings. Each time she spoke, she repeated the same truth. Fairness is not optional. It is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of banking. At home, Elena had grown too. She no longer argued about her mother's choices, but proudly defended them among her peers. She wrote essays at school about systemic discrimination and the importance of reform, inspired by the legacy she had witnessed firsthand. One evening, as they watched the sunset together from their balcony, Elena said softly, "Mom, I used to wish you'd just use your power to punish them, but now I see you wanted to fix the whole system. That's harder, but it lasts longer." Lillian hugged her daughter, tears pricking her eyes. "That's exactly it. Sweetheart, revenge is short-lived. Justice builds a future." The memory of the slap still lingered, not as pain, but as a marker. The line between the past and the future. It had been the spark that forced the truth into the open. But it was everything after. The courage of Marissa, the voices of customers, the reforms embraced. That defined the legacy. Lillian often reflected that she hadn't simply fired a few employees. She had shifted the culture of an entire institution, and in doing so, she had honored not just Clara's dream, but the dreams of everyone who had ever been turned away, denied, humiliated in a bank lobby on the 8th-month anniversary of the incident. Ocean Trust held a community celebration at the Miami branch. The lobby was filled with music, laughter, and families. Lillian stood at the podium, Marissa by her side, Elena in the front row. She spoke not as a CEO above her audience, but as a woman among them. 8 months ago, I walked into this bank in disguise and was told I didn't belong. Today, I stand here proud to say this bank belongs to all of you. The doors are open, the welcome is real, and the promise is lasting. We will stumble, we will face challenges, but we will never again turn away someone because of how they look or where they come from. This is your bank, and this is your future. The crowd erupted in applause, some with tears streaming down their cheeks, others clapping until their hands hurt. As the celebration ended, Lillian stepped aside, letting the community fill the space, knowing her role was not to stand above but to walk alongside. She felt a deep peace, a sense that the struggle had been worth every bruise, every insult, every sleepless night, for the first time. She allowed herself to believe the fight her grandmother began decades ago had finally found resolution. Yet even in that peace, she knew the work was never truly finished. Change required vigilance, justice demanded endurance, and legacy was built day by day. Lillian Harper smiled as Elena wrapped her arms around her waist. She looked out over the crowd, families laughing, bankers shaking hands, children running through the lobby, and whispered, "This is what it was all for." And in that moment, the future felt not just possible, but already here. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next.